So good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of the Malta Business Network, welcome to this webinar on the entrepreneurial mind. We've got three great panelists giving their insights today. And before I introduce them, let me just add that you can at any time type in a question through the Q&A button. So please feel free to engage with us, and I'll endeavour to put your questions to the panel during our hour together. There'll also be a short survey at the end, so we'd really welcome it if you could complete that. That would be super, thank you. And finally, to say that our network, the MBN, is always looking for new members and new ideas. We normally meet in either London or Malta every month for networking, social, maybe a beer or a glass of wine. But with the blasted COVID, we're kind of now living online. Okay, so soon we hope to be back, so come and connect with us. For those of you not aware, the UK Malta relationship is really a very strong one, very strong cultural, historical ties, lots of commercial interaction, social interaction, and our connections can really bring lots of opportunities. And I think one thing we're going to hear today, that to be an entrepreneur, to have a mindset of networking and making those connections is really important. Okay, so now turning to my expert panel. By way of introductions, and just to get the ball rolling as sort of quickly as possible, I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves. I'm also going to ask them, what does the word entrepreneur actually mean to them? And what do they feel is the key attribute of an entrepreneur? Because entrepreneur can mean different things to different people. So Deborah, I think I've selected you up first. An entrepreneur, Deborah, what conjures up in your mind when I say that word?
A person identifying a problem, solving it, and adding value. Yeah, I can go into more detail, but I won't. By way, I hope that answer kind of gives you some. By way of introduction, I'm half English, half Maltese. So this, as a bridge between the UK and Malta, is perfect. So thank you very much for having me. I run something called a Money Circle, where I identify entrepreneurs on behalf of investors. We profile investors and we match not only the problems they want to solve, but also the mindset. And I'm based mainly in the Middle East, but I come to Malta from time to time and cause trouble as much as I can.
Yes, I've heard stories about that, Deborah. Yes. And what do you feel, Deborah? I mean, obviously you've got a huge amount of international experience there. What entrepreneurship and the sort of key mindset? What do you think that is for you?
So I'm really glad that you brought up because there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think it's essential for everyone to have an entrepreneurial mindset, which is identifying ways of adding value and contributing. I think there's also a big difference. I think the word entrepreneur is very much in. So a few things. First of all, I'm concerned that it's become a bit of a buzzword. There is a difference between being an entrepreneur sometimes and being a CEO, and just because you're one doesn't mean you're the other. Also being an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you have to run a unicorn. It just means that it can be even a small business. So that also requires entrepreneurial spirit. You've got to be smart. You've got to be actually pretty empathetic with what your customer really needs, because you have to create the right solution at the right price at the right time. And that actually is quite an art. You've got to be super flexible, but also obstinate at the same time. Some entrepreneurs tend to be ahead of the curve. So being able to influence others and bringing others with them is extremely important. And look, an entrepreneur cannot be successful if they don't have the right ecosystem around them. In Malta's terms, for instance, looking at the angel investing network, looking at collaboration with existing family businesses. I think there's much more to be won through collaboration than competition. And also the difference between entrepreneurs of the past, perhaps, on the island, and entrepreneurs now. Technology enables us to cross borders. So a global mindset is extremely important. And of course, being able to understand kind of the different cultures in that. Anyway, I can bore you to death if you want, but.
Great. Deb, thank you for what a great start, and lots of things in there. I like this idea of having an entrepreneurial mindset, but not necessarily being that entrepreneur at the heart of the action. I think that's really interesting. Let me move across to my second panelist, Tony. Tony, you've got some Malta connections, I know, but what does the word entrepreneur mean to you, Tony?
I think the word entrepreneur really means someone who's prepared to lead others or drive a product or service. Probably somebody who's got a lot of ambition and energy, but is just a normal person. Nothing different, not Superman or Wonder Woman or Iron Man even. Maybe educated, maybe not. Maybe intelligent, maybe not. But almost certainly has one thing that has to exist in an entrepreneur, and that's to be determined and resilient. I think bounce back ability was a comment I saw somewhere else. The entrepreneur can always bounce back and really has to be brave. I think it's the brave-hearted nature of an entrepreneur that makes them different from others. Basically, entrepreneurs are just like everybody else, but they don't have the brakes. So they don't stop when they see something that looks a bit dangerous or a bit risky. They see it as an opportunity. They think about the same things that other people think about. The difference is they go out and do something about it. One entrepreneur I know, for example, he runs a very large business. Every time he buys a business, there's no due diligence whatsoever. He just says, I know in my gut this is the right thing to do. Now, that same individual has made over 100 million in transactions over the last few years because of his gut. Entrepreneur.
Yeah. So a bit like the art of the deal and Donald Trump, would you say, Tony, or not? Yeah.
You could say that. I'm not sure I'd want to compare anybody with Donald Trump.
But by way of your background, Tony, so the audience knows, what's your story?
Yeah, so my backstory is I'm kind of half Welsh and I feel half Maltese. I've spent 10 years here altogether. I worked for 30 odd years in banks. I started as a cashier, worked my way through the various ranks, took over the running of the UK bank, which is 31,000 people. And that was just such a scary experience every morning, just walking into the office. Then became deputy CEO for Europe, based out of Paris. Again, responsible for, I think it's 21 countries there. Finally, decided time to move on, age 50, and I went on and joined an independent bank, a bank called Bank Dhofar in Oman, in the Middle East, beautiful country. And found the bank needed so much change. It was unbelievable. So I bought and sold many banks at HSBC, but I'd never taken one from such a mess to such a wonderful conclusion where we won sort of 28, 30 awards and so on. So I think I'd like to think of myself as an entrepreneur within a larger organization, and now I'm an entrepreneur here in Malta, running 3 different businesses that are all their fledgling state, and they're challenging.
Yeah, very, very good, Tony. A lot of great experience there, which I'm sure we'll tap into later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our third panelist, Rachel is head of entrepreneurial skills at King's College. So I guess, Rachel, you might know something about the entrepreneurial skill set. Am I right? Oh.
Classic. Yeah, I try to, it's sort of my job. So from my kind of perspective, I massively echo what Deborah was saying about there's kind of 2 definitions that float around for me. One is entrepreneur in the sense of I have started a business, whatever scale or size that is. And then there's this kind of second one, which is the realm I operate in more, which is what does it mean to be an entrepreneurial human? Because to me, that's more useful to me as a definition, because it's a skill set and a way of approaching problems or opportunities, and applying that skill set regardless of the context that you're operating in. So I think that what it means to be an entrepreneur, I think there is something in there about being a person who wants to make things better. I think for me, there's something about the entrepreneurial spirit which is innately optimistic, that where other people see problems, you see opportunities, and that you are willing to be the person that's going to stick their neck out and say, I can see a different way of doing things, which I think speaks to what Tony was saying as well about being brave. But I think for me, we've done a piece of work at King's to try and pin down what we think are the core ingredients to what that entrepreneurial mindset is, which was my task to kind of try and push forward. So that project resulted in a skills framework where we kind of pinpoint 7 different skills that we teach and develop in our staff, our students and our alumni to help them develop their own entrepreneurial mindset that they can use regardless of whether they're going to start their own company or not, and can be applied across the board for any career path.
Yeah, that does sound really, really powerful, actually, really interesting to understand. Thanks, Rachel. Well, let's get the discussion proper going. And back to Deborah to kick us off. I think, Deborah, you talked about having, if you like, one foot in Malta and one foot outside Malta with your international experience. We've got quite a lot of Maltese members today of our network. Okay, I mean, what do you think is what's your view of the entrepreneurial mindset in Malta, and is that any different to any other location, do you think?
So, look, I have a real soft spot for Malta. I was raised in Saudi Arabia, and I went back to Malta to visit when I was 27 years old, which is actually when I first met Tony. And I decided to stay there. So I was super lucky. I worked with Chris Grech in building Bay Street from the ground. So I had the privilege of working with someone who I think is a phenomenal entrepreneur, and how to navigate the Maltese landscape. Malta has the same issues as everywhere else in the world, but I always describe it but everything's very concentrated. So I describe it as the parfum as opposed to the eau de toilette, which is the rest of the world. I think it's a phenomenal place to test things because you feel the impact that much faster. So if someone wants to iterate something, it's much cheaper to do it there. As for the entrepreneurial mindset there, it's funny, you've got 2 extremes, right? You've got, some would say that the Maltese are perhaps sometimes a little bit too entrepreneurial in terms of deal making. And here I want to insert something where entrepreneurship is not about I win, you lose. Sustainable entrepreneurship is about seeking win-wins. And I think on an island like Malta, because it's so densely populated, I think it's even more important. You have, so it's interesting, right? So one of the things I did when I came back to Malta was I set up TEDx Valletta. And I wanted to set up TEDx Valletta in order to inspire and engage bright minds. But one part of the Maltese, they kind of hang back. They're not very good necessarily at coming forward. So it's as if they need more cajoling to come forward. I've had the privilege of working with some accelerators there, and I used to fly back every month to support and to be a mentor at the startup weekends. And again, you have to kind of coax and bring them out of their shell. I think anyone who has had experience abroad and comes back has a bit of an advantage because their mindset is a little bit different. I know some people talk about the island mentality, and that needs to be cracked if people really want to be a phenomenal entrepreneur. There's someone else, of course, who I hold in super high regard, God rest his soul, which is Daniel Reggiano, who built numerous amazing businesses and was, I believe, the first person to create a local brand and export it. And yeah, so I think Malta's got great talent. I think the the ones who succeed sometimes succeed in spite of the system, and and those that have an entrepreneurial family tend to have a bit of an advantage. But I would really, really, really like to see, I don't know, make people believe in themselves that they can do it. Think bigger. We ran a competition for 2 sessions called Ideas from Malta as part of a European initiative. And it was identifying business solutions to global challenges. And it was really interesting. A lot of the ideas that came forward were, I mean, they were thinking small. They were just thinking about, they were identifying some tiny little problem, only thinking in terms of the island. So I actually went and headhunted some founders of SMEs to see what ideas that they had kind of hidden, and encourage them to bring them out. So when you encourage people to bring them out, create a platform to fuel that, I think the potential there is huge.
Oh, that's interesting.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think, no, you more than answered, yeah. I was just reflecting on what you were saying. I mean, I think we seem to have a very high expectation of Malta, don't we? But then we've got to remember it's just an island with a population of 400,000 people on it, and I do wonder sometimes whether we, expect, as you say, you'd like to see something a little bit more powerful happening there. But in fact, doesn't it not punch above its weight, do you think? Isn't there some great stories and great ambition and great entrepreneurial journeys that have come out of Malta, do you think?
There are some great stories, but there is a bit of a limiting belief system by the old guard of, well, we're Malta, what can you do? And kind of, I don't know,
Well, let me ask Tony about this, because I think if anyone's old guard here, it's Tony. Okay, so what do you think, Tony?
I think I'm old guard. No, it's really interesting, Deborah, because what you say, I've seen, but I kind of got surprised really. So the very first time I came to Malta was 21 years ago, and it was the start of the first international bank in Malta. It's hard to believe now that we were the first international bank. And so I was taken out to see some of our potential clients. We didn't have a client base then, we were brand new. And I walked into very dark rooms with very sage, wise, old men. And it was quite difficult, to be frank, to really work with them and to work out how to work with them until the following day. And the following day, almost without exception, their sons came to see me and said, you met my dad yesterday? He's asked me to come along and see you and to do some business with you. And it was the most fantastic experience. I even have one, very well known, may well be on the call, I don't know, who said, okay, so we'll do some business. Can we borrow some money for you from a project? I said, yep, you can. And he then said, what security do you want? I said, none. Just the security of your family is good enough for me, because it was a great family. And that was a nice experience, because that hadn't been known before. And I'd probably say that in Malta, entrepreneurs exist and develop and flourish and wait for it in spite of the banks and not because of the banks. And I'd love to see a bit more entrepreneurial spirit from the banking sector. It can exist here. The risks are so different and are so well understood that bankers can afford to be a little bit more liberal and a bit more prepared to be brave. So if I had one sort of wish, it's to see more entrepreneurial bankers in Malta. And that doesn't mean to say that they are flouting the rules on risk and on money laundering and everything else. Quite the reverse, actually. A very good banker will know how to deal with all of those things and will still be able to lend money to the right businesses to help them grow. There's just one other aspect. I've been lucky for the last 2 years to be the chair of the Malta Trade Awards. And the people who've come and presented have been absolutely stunning. I mean, when a guy from Gozo walks in and says, most of my business is done in Bangladesh, a little bit in India, and I'm growing into Pakistan. You think, I really don't believe this, but that wasn't a one-off. That was the cut of the cloth. That was the way that the Maltese are. They are natural traders by history. I've got so many other things to say now that I'll stop talking as well. Deborah, I'll pick up on one point you said, which is about being a microcosm of the world. And it absolutely is. So you want to start something new. Electric vehicles, shared car riding, electric vehicles that you can drive yourself, scooters, motorbikes, all of these things. We've got companies in Malta that are at the absolute pinnacle of the world in developing these technologies for a country, and they're here.
And warning systems for potholes.
Well,
I haven't seen a pothole recently.
Let me try and bring Rachel in, because we're going completely off script here, which is fantastic. Okay, I think one thing that struck me about, again, what Deb said was about this idea that, Malta's a very good test bed. And it got me thinking about my mentoring. I do some mentoring at King's College with Rachel on the startups there. And I always say one of the biggest and finite resources you have is your time. People talk about cash and finance and all the other things. But actually, it's normally when you run out of time that things get difficult. And obviously with King's, King's is in the center of a capital. We've got Malta as a very concentrated network where hopefully you can shortcut and save time, I think. But from your point of view, Rachel, so King's decided to set up this Entrepreneurial Institute in the center of London. What was the thinking behind that, and how is that playing out, would you say, at the moment in London?
I think, so the Institute, just for a little bit of context, the Institute's 5 years old this year, which still feels pretty new. We still feel like a bit of a startup ourselves. And I think for an institution as old and traditional as King's College to say, we are going to agree to this entity that's kind of its own thing, to just try and create some stuff and see what you kind of do as your own kind of sandbox, was, I think, quite a brave move on the side of King's, actually. But I think it's something that's the proof is starting to come through now. We're on our fifth cohort of or going into our fifth cohort on our accelerator program that's raised over £40 million. They've created over 280 jobs. You cannot deny that the innovation that comes out of a place like King's. And I think there was a kind of acknowledgement that you've got all of these amazing minds flooding to this one university that are going to be creating things of their own. They're not just going to be coming to study medicine and then going into the NHS and that's the only kind of career path. And I think it's an area within higher education as a whole in the UK that is booming and needs to continue to boom, because, not to mention it, but the times are kind of changing at the moment, and entrepreneurship offers an opportunity for people that may at the moment be losing jobs or considering a complete career change whilst they've been at home more, or any of those things. That I think it's really having a moment right now, and that universities are realizing the role that they can play within their entrepreneurial ecosystems that weren't really recognized before. And the university accelerator or incubator is having a bit of a light shine on it at the moment, especially in London, because it's where the talent's coming from. They're coming from world-class universities with brilliant educational backgrounds who have some of the best founder market fit you will ever find, and really understanding their problem areas and developing stuff that is cutting edge. And I think not only that, the position that we're able to occupy as an entrepreneurship institute, which is slightly different from other university accelerators, is the emphasis on the individual and the skill set that we are able to foster in those people, staff, students and alumni alike. We work across our whole community to be able to foster what we're talking about in terms of an entrepreneurial mindset, that even if it's not a startup that they're creating, people that come out of King's have a certain way about them, and that they will then be able to go and have impact in whatever realm they decide to kind of conquer next. So I think it's a really important moment in time where entrepreneurship within universities is booming, and I think King's is completely at the forefront of that movement.
I wonder, just following on from that, and again, now we're really off script, okay, but if you think about the fact that your work's been attached to an entrepreneurial institute within the context of a college or a university, if you think of somewhere like Malta, I know you don't really know Malta, but how important is it for those entrepreneurial skill sets, that learning, does it have to have a business school, or does it have to have how do you get that attachment to that higher education, do you think? What's the best way of doing that?
I think it's really important that the entrepreneurial stuff actually happens outside of the business school. And they might not like me for saying this, but I think I can fundamentally disagree that the only innovative people in our societies go to business school. That there are, innovative thinkers or people that will have that spark, or whatever you want to kind of call it, that are interested in different things. So they will go and study whatever it is that interests them, whether that's medicine, whether that's law, whether that's humanities, whether all of the subjects. And I think one of the things that we really try and hammer home at King's from the entrepreneurial perspective is diversity of thought. And that actually, if we only foster people within our business school, we're setting ourselves up to fail, because we're essentially saying we are backing groupthink, and that's not helpful to anyone. And actually, part of what we do, and part of the stand that we took right at the beginning and we said to King's, we don't just want to help your business school students. We want to have access to all of the staff, all of the students, and all of the alumni, and have design programs that brings those groups of people together, because innovation happens when you have diversity talking to each other. And I think for us to limit ourselves to a pool of students who have already opted in to something connected to entrepreneurship misses the point. And that what we're trying to do as an institute is actually take our message to the people that don't currently associate themselves with it, to start saying to them, what would you consider an entrepreneurial version of you to look like? We can help you discover that. Come with us and we'll show you what we mean. And I think that we've tried really hard to create programs that resonate with those kinds of messages. We're not telling you to down your tools in your medical studies, come with us and start a startup. We're saying we can give you a toolkit that means you can be one of the most cutting edge doctors leading your field, and give you the tools to go and be a doctor. We don't want you to not be a doctor. We want you to be the best doctor you can be, with an entrepreneurial mindset to help you on your way.
No, that all makes sense, Rachel. Yeah, I think that's really powerful, actually. And certainly for my background, I never went to business school. I studied natural sciences. I felt there was always something in me that would kind of start a business, but I guess it started mainly out of a frustration rather than anything inspirational. Okay, but nevertheless, it got woken up, and it's quite difficult to know. There was no resources or information about how to go about building a business or starting something. And in fact, I remember kicking off a setup in Malta, and I had to wait for the Malta Development Corporation board meeting, which meant that I had to wait 3 months before I could actually open a bank account. Okay, so thankfully that's all changed. Okay, and I think there's much more responsiveness now and more proactiveness in that world to reduce those barriers. Okay, and I think I don't know, perhaps one more question, Rachel, of you, because I think again, Deborah was talking about this almost like a confidence factor to get started in an entrepreneurial journey. Obviously, with King's and diversity, do you find you have to work at that as well? That Malta's no different to London, is it, in that respect, in terms of female founders or that sort of thing? Is it the same sort of issues in London as elsewhere, presumably?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's more research coming out about different demographics and how they either opt in or don't opt in to entrepreneurship. And we have focused on that as an institute. We doubled down on the Women Entrepreneurs program because it's so distinct and there's so much data around not enough women are starting businesses. So we run a Women Entrepreneurs program with the aim of trying to get our accelerator, the King's 20, to have sustainable gender parity year on year of the founders that were coming onto that program. And we've achieved that in the 2 years. It's only been 2 years since we started it, and we're off to a kind of running start. But I think you have to be willing to lean into those conversations, because we've been able to, rather than just say we're going to support women and we're going to do a load of things and it will be fine, it was kind of we're willing to try a couple of things and then listen, try a couple of things and then listen, to work out what it was that was really the key. And we found a couple of really telling moments in time where those confidence dips occurred in their entrepreneurial journey. So there was one around the point at which they had to go out and validate their idea. Going out and speaking to potential customers was a thing where they would be like, oh, okay, I don't want to talk about this, so I'm just going to stop. And there was another one at the first moment that they had to pitch, and giving them the opportunity to pitch in an all-female room before they had to do it in a mixed room helped them take that step and move along their journey. And I think those kinds of confidence things only come if you're willing to listen to the group that you're trying to target and not try and shoehorn everybody into one solution. And we're doing a lot of work to now look at different types of social mobility and different groups that we might not even know that we're excluding right now. But we're willing to ask the questions because we're committed to the end goal, which is that we believe entrepreneurship is an opportunity for everyone. If there's some people that right now that don't believe that for themselves, we have an obligation to help clear their path. So I think it's definitely something that we've started, but we haven't gone the whole way yet by any means.
No, I think that, and again, I would resonate with that. I mean, I think for me, the word entrepreneur, a lot of it is about being able to sell an idea or a concept. And I can imagine that for a lot of people is a big hurdle to go out and meet someone face to face, get a meeting or present and things. And some groups of people or individuals themselves will struggle with that. But unless you can actually sell something, then you won't have a business, and that's it. End of story. Tony's nodding wisely again at me.
Yeah, it's the scourge of email, in my opinion, that everybody loves to email the people they want to contact, and it's probably the worst thing that they can do. An email to say, what about coffee on Thursday at 10 is brilliant and is fine. But an email to try and make your pitch is probably the most ineffective way of making a pitch that I can think of.
Well, Tony, obviously you mentioned before about being brave and having that quality entrepreneur, but you're obviously an advisor to entrepreneurs, and you've done that successfully over quite a few years now. I mean, how important is it, to be kind of, is a quality of an entrepreneur mindset to be coachable? Do you have to be a bit malleable and take that on board, or do you have to be a bit obstinate and ignore people like your advice? Okay.
What a good question. I used to think there was absolutely no benefit of advisors at all. That an entrepreneur knows that they know their mind, they know what they want to achieve, and they're going to get on with it. Advisors will just borrow their watch to tell them the time. Now that I am an advisor, I think it's a really valuable role. And I think it's valuable because you can bring a number of different things to an entrepreneur. One could be a specialist skill. So, for example, we've been working with an absolute nuts and bolts business for the last few weeks, and they need to raise 15 million euros in order to get their business properly funded and off the ground. We've been able to do it. We've done it with banks and with other agencies and funds who are sort of hardly known about, but really. They could never have made the contacts that we've made, and they couldn't wear the suits that we wear or the ties that we wear and go to the meetings that we do and manage their proposal in the way that we've learned how to do over the years. This particular business, within 5 years, utterly confident, you can put a price tag of 70 to 80 million on it, whereas right now you're looking at needing to borrow the first 15 to really get moving. I think also what I've been surprised at is I always thought it would be a horrible job to be a chairman of a company, because chairmen can't really do very much. They can only sort of encourage, or they can discourage, or they can question. Actually, again, complete about turn. What I've learned is that as a chairman, you can really ask the right questions to help people come to the right results. And that might be just a case of encouraging people to be brave and to follow through the courage of their convictions, even though 25 people have told them it won't work. If they really believe it will work, then they should have a go, because their track record is good. They're very good at thinking things through. It's also good in respect of some companies, and we have some here in Malta which are very much family businesses and have got into a little bit of a rut of this is the way we do things because this is the way we've always done things. And so as a chairman, oblique advisor, I know they're different things, but they're always kind of almost merge in some ways, is as a chairman, then you're encouraging them to break out of their boundaries, and you have all those challenges of how far can you take them over a relatively short period of time. So I'm forever saying things like this morning with a broker, we had a meeting, and my comments were all about, well, do you think we'll be ready to go in May next year, or in June, or perhaps September? Because somehow you've got to convert their idea into something that can actually be tangible, and adding a timeline to it. It can be as simple as that.
Yeah, well, I think advisory is really an interesting area, actually, and I think successful entrepreneurs would always have, I think, a mentor, even if it's really not directly connected with the business, that they can bounce ideas off. We've got a question coming in. Perhaps I'll go back to Debs on this. Because I know you've got an interest, Debs, in ethical businesses. You mentioned it a bit at your introduction, and the question came in about, is an entrepreneur always driven by money? Okay, or is there some greater good? And what's your view of being a successful entrepreneurship and that skill set, do you think?
So I would say no. And the reason is this: and it's becoming even more so. So before my current life, I used to be a partner with Korn & Ferry, which is a global executive search firm. And we analyzed what makes companies and people gel and excel. And a lot of these companies were either starting out, raising money in capital markets, expanding into other markets. If they were purely about money, it was near impossible to get the brightest brains on board. The brightest brains need something that they've got their own inner aspiration. Money gives us something, but money is not the end goal. So money could give us freedom. Money could give us access to the best education for our kids. It could give us the ability to be major philanthropist, whatever. So if someone thinks money is their end goal, I can understand why someone would have that belief, because there's all this hype around valuations and how much money a company has raised. But actually, when you consider how many companies bomb, so the data shows, some research that CB Insights did, which is a company in the States, a phenomenal platform. The research they did showed that 70% of early stage tech companies fail within the first 20 months, and they would have raised an average of $1.3 million. Now, for me, that is money burned. And then all this hype and all these articles about, it's an amazing company that raised this. Look at Theranos, for instance. It was being touted as an amazing unicorn and, the youngest female billionaire and so on and so forth. Again, a lot of investors got burned there. So no. And actually another great example is Google. So Google set out to do no evil, and then when they realized how much money they could make from data, they kind of veered away from the original purpose that they set out to do. And so the research that we did, and part of our protocol, there's what companies say they stand for, there's their practices, and if there's a gap between those two, you're actually going to tick off a lot of customers, you're going to tick off your people, you're going to burn and churn, and I would say you're not sustainable, especially in an environment where more investors and more consumers have more ESG elements, so environmental awareness, societal impact. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a definite no. Thanks, Deb. Yeah. No, I think perhaps Rachel could comment as well, because I know from King's you get over 200 applications a year, I think, for the accelerator, and you only accept about 20, I think, a year. And I think I'm right in saying that quite a lot of those are not for profit. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, we get a huge number of applications from either not-for-profit, social enterprise and charities. We accept companies across the board. They don't have to be for profit to come onto the King's 20. And we from being able to see that number of applications and that number of pitches, and also I run a program called the Ideas Factory, which is an earlier stage of we take somebody from light bulb moment to this might be a viable business proposition. And the number of applications that we get that are someone's just found a problem that's frustrating them and they want to fix it because they want the solution. And I think whether the solution ends up being for profit or not, we have an awful lot of that sentiment. I don't know, can't speak across the board, but definitely coming out of King's. I mean, King's slogan is make the world a better place, so you can kind of see why. But the massive trend, and you'll see it from when we announce the companies coming onto our next cohort, the number of sustainability focused companies is creeping up every year. And that's going to be the standard before long. That those people are not being driven by profit, they are being driven because they want to protect our planet. And you'll see that in the millennials and the Gen Zs coming through, that they have a really deep attachment to impact and social consciousness and wanting to leave the world better than they found it, or at least do no harm at the very minimum. And I think I have a lot of faith and a lot of it makes my heart happy to see the number of people coming out of King's and other accelerators that I see across London that are not putting in financial models that would make them the most profit, because that's not in line with the vision that they had for the solution that they wanted to create. And the number of people that are willing to stand by their vision of what they were going to create over and above becoming a millionaire, and I think that, like Deb was saying, that to me ultimately is going to create more sustainable business, because it's going to create more loyal customer bases, because people are going to believe in what the company's doing. I always go back to the kind of Simon Sinek golden circle thing of why you do it, how you do it, what you do. It all joins up and it all means something together, because people see it's comprehensive in its whole. Everything joins up, and we can see why a company is doing something, that they're doing it in a way that connects with their mission, and what they produce as a result of that connects back to me as a customer, and I want to be a part of that. So I think I would definitely agree, and I don't think it would be a space that I would be as passionate about if everybody was in it for the money, quite frankly.
No, I concur. I mean, I think the most inspirational, passionate, and actually probably the majority of businesses that have won, that certainly the awards that I give for leadership are actually the non-for-profit. It's you just want to give everyone your money, because the stories are so powerful.
Just take it.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Which thus proving that most salespeople like to be sold to, which is probably what I am at the end of the day. But I mean, just generally, I mean, if we go back to skills then and try to bring it back perhaps to that brain challenge, questions have come up around teams as well. I mean, how much of entrepreneurship is about the power of an individual, do you think, and how much is about the power of the team? I mean, what does the panel think about that? Who would like to try that first? Debs, go for it. Yeah.
The cohesion of the team is magic. So being able to understanding what you're brilliant at and what you're rubbish at, I think, are essential skills if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And you need to, most people as default, find people who are like them. And you need to be very contrarian, and you need to find people that are very different to you. You don't necessarily have to be the best of buddies, but you actually do need to respect each other. We actually came up with a crazy idea for co-founders, which is creating a prenup. where we take them through our values and these unsets of expectations. Because one of the areas I tend to spend a lot of time on is making sure teams stick together, because that's actually linked with the viability of the business. So cohesion is essential. And for that, there are three main things. So there's competence, there's character. So is this person a safe pair of hands? Are they trustworthy? Are they honest? Are they transparent? And their commitment. You can have someone who's brilliant at something, but if they're not committed to fulfilling the vision, they have another vision, their engagement will actually be diluted. And then the one that really kabuches people is circumstances. One thing I have found is some entrepreneurs set out when they're single, and then they either get engaged or they get kids, and they have different stresses on them. So depending on the stage of the business, that extra pressure, if it's not communicated and dealt with, can be the wedge that actually makes them fall apart. It's fascinating. Yeah.
I like the idea of the prenup. I made a huge mistake when I started my business, getting the wrong co-founder, and it took me about 4 years to sort it out. So I shall a prenup next time around. Tony, do prenups work for you? Do you think teamwork? What do you think?
I think teamwork is everything. You need a strong leader, yes, but the leader may be more of a visionary. The leader may be more of a risk person. It depends. As long as you have the right mix and flavor overall. But there does need to be a vision, and there does need to be a team. And I remember working in Oman, where I joined a bank that's vision, which is strongly shared by the whole of its team, was to be one of the better banks in Oman. Now, there are only 6 banks in Oman, so it wasn't exactly the most visionary of visions. So we sat down and we rewrote the vision to become the best bank in the Middle East. And most people were kind of slightly bemused by that. How could this bank be better than banks in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, and Bahrain, and Saudi, and so on? And then we said, well, okay, so if that's what we want to be, how do we behave as a team? Because team behaviors weren't good, frankly. And someone came up with a line that we should be divided we fail, and together we succeed. I said, do we need that first part about divided we fail? And he said, yes. If you worked around here the last few years, you need to tell people that if they're divided, the business will fail. I thought it's just a sharp lesson for me, living in a sort of a milk and honey environment. Together we succeed, but he pointed out it's more than that. Sometimes it is divided we fail.
Yeah, well, I think that's good, isn't it? I guess again touching on the fact that there are these cultural aspects again, and also being aware of the risks that can happen, and what do you actually put up front to try and mitigate that, I think is interesting, isn't it? So we've got a lot of questions coming in, but I just wanted to just reflect a little bit on the brains test, Rachel, which obviously I scored very highly on. I don't know about everybody else, but could you tell us a little bit about this cognition test, and what was the thinking about it, and what's going on there? I think the audience would like to hear more about that. Yeah.
So we decided at King's that we didn't want to just say all this stuff about entrepreneurship being for everybody. We wanted to get evidence about whether this age-long question about whether entrepreneurs are born or made. So we now have a huge research project going on that's a collaboration between the Entrepreneurship Institute and our Institute for Psychology and Neuroscience. So the Entrepreneurial Brain Test is part of the kind of first iteration of our research project that's going out to understand, can you tell from somebody's brain whether they are entrepreneurial or not, which is absolutely fascinating as a topic in general. But the first kind of iteration of this and the brain challenge that's come out is a cognitive test. So it appears as an hour's worth of playing some quite frustrating games. But what it's doing is essentially mapping your cognitive functions onto entrepreneurial traits that have been identified through research and literature that's come out for years and years. So, and actually the first half of it maps onto what is now our skills framework at King's. So our 7 skills of an entrepreneurial mindset. So what the test will do is take you through a range of different challenges and games that test different parts of your cognitive ability, and then map it onto traits that we see commonly in entrepreneurs. And you get a personalized report around which ones you've performed well on versus like the average population. So it's really fascinating because you get a whole report around your entrepreneurial skills and your cognitive functions. But what it's telling us is, can you tell by somebody's brain function and cognitive ability whether they're more inclined to be an entrepreneur or not? And I think for us, it's going to be quite interesting to see the results, because from my standpoint, it's whether someone has started a business or not, is that the defining feature of what makes an entrepreneur? And actually, I'm expecting that might not be true. But yeah, so it's an ongoing research project, and we will be moving on to later stages of the research, which will include full MRI scans of entrepreneurs' brains and things as they go through an entrepreneurial journey. But this is the kind of first test bed for us of asking as many people, whether they have started a business or not, to complete the test, so that we have a set of data set that can start to show these correlations of these different types of cognitive functions and how they show up in entrepreneurial people. So yeah, it's quite fascinating.
I think it's very fascinating, and I found it, I must admit, I found it a real workout, and I felt myself slightly under pressure, as having described myself as an entrepreneur. And actually I had some traits which apparently I'm very good at 3D visualization, which really surprised me.
There you go.
But yeah, so I think for the audience, please, if you can try that, I think it'd be very useful to input that to King's, and hopefully, Rachel, do you know when we might be able to see some outputs of that research?
So we're testing on the cognitive test for the next month, so definitely have a go at it, and then it will take some time for the data analysis, but as soon as we've got some kind of reports, we can definitely feed it through the network to kind of release the findings from that initial bit of research before we go on to the MRI stages.
Have you done it, Tony?
No, not yet. I'm kind of, I've been too busy trying to be an entrepreneur.
That's just about an acceptable answer, I think. How about you guys? Yeah.
I tried to, Mike.
So I was halfway through, and then I got pulled into a call, and then all my systems went down. So I need to start over, which of course I love to do. That says so much about me. Yeah.
Well, let's. We've only got a few minutes to go, actually, and I'm conscious that we've still got quite a few questions come in. Obviously, some questions about the pandemic and COVID, and what impact is that having, do you think, on entrepreneurship generally? What do we see? We obviously read in the business news about the winners and the losers, okay, but also some quite innovative things are coming out of the stresses and strain and accelerating various things. What does the panel think about the current environment, about the entrepreneurial mindset in this set of circumstances? Who would like to have a go at that? Yeah.
I wouldn't want to start really. I think, David, clearly it's made life so difficult for businesses in industries like hotels and airports and airlines and stuff. So those things are kind of givens, and I'm not sure there's much they can do other than just try and stay in business, which is really sad. But then there are lots of other companies, lots of other individuals who really have capitalized so well. The delivery companies have realized now everybody wants stuff being delivered at home. The parks and so on around our cities and towns in the UK especially, actually flourishing with people, because exercise is allowed. There's a chap called Joe Wicks in the UK who does an exercise program every morning, or did, and he was getting like over 1 million followers, just 1 million direct hits, and how many times it was being played to groups, I have no idea. So it was probably tens of millions of people each morning were listening to his exercise classes. So I think where there's a real entrepreneurial spirit and still the freedom to do something about it, COVID has actually allowed some people to do incredibly well. And some companies in things like IT have really stood up for the challenge, and they've, I mean, their performance has been as good as it would have been before, if not better, because they've been innovative.
Yeah, and I think there's this concept, isn't there, about sealing your brand. So your response to COVID and how you've actually, like Joe Wicks, for example, about how he's kind of sealed his brand by engaging and getting those things moving on his YouTube channel. Yeah. What about you, Des? Well, how do you see the pandemic and entrepreneurial mindset?
So, look, the fact that it happened is terrible. But what's good about it is, number one, a lot of people talked about innovation before and how things were, how digitization was changing the world. And actually, there was a lot of talk before. And I think COVID accelerated that process. I think it disrupted business as usual, which I think needed to happen, especially in certain sectors and certain mindsets. And it disrupted consumer patterns and consumer habits. So, and from a Maltese perspective, of course, considering that the economy is so reliant on tourism, the economy is going to take a big hit. What's interesting, however, is that there are a lot of SMEs, for instance, who had to pivot and expand and think out of the box. Banks have had to not talk about innovation and teleworking, but actually do it. And I think their brains have been nudged along the way. And there's a different appetite, which I'm really, really happy about. So I tried to do something in Malta about 5 years ago, but everyone is very, very comfortable. And in fact, there was one person, after an hour and a half, I said to him, I can't help but feel that we have the best steak in town and everyone's a vegetarian. And he laughed and he said, it's true. It's because we're all comfortable and no one wanted to challenge the status quo. Now the status quo has been challenged. So actually I'm in discussions at the moment with a bank on the island who wants to set up a fund to help fund SMEs who have come up with these ideas and to help mitigate not only the impact from COVID, but also future disruption that is predicted from the fourth industrial revolution and climate change. So there's exciting times ahead, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you, Debs. And we're nearly out of time, but Rachel, it's business as usual for Kings in COVID, I think, isn't it? With online and everything. Is that true or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to adapt to a really rapid period of change of moving a lot of programs online. We were delivering programs as the Entrepreneurship Institute online anyway, but I think across higher education, people have had to massively change the way that they're teaching and the way that people are learning. And I think for us, the challenge is, how do you enable people to do the co-curricular stuff, the experience of being at university and all of the soft skills that you develop through that experience, as well as learning the material on your studies. And I think the challenge for us, again, not that we're we're trying to practice what we preach, right? As the Entrepreneurship Institute, we're trying to face that as an opportunity, and there is a hell of a lot of opportunities in COVID and the way that we can respond to it. And I think for us, it's actually helping us land our message, because what we've been saying to people is entrepreneurial mindsets and developing entrepreneurial skills means that you can be someone who's not just a victim of whatever the future throws at you. You get to become an architect or a designer of what that future looks like. And that puts you in a position of power rather than a position of vulnerability. Which would you rather choose? Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are far more receptive to that idea now and are listening when they possibly weren't before.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good place to draw a conclusion. I think definitely if I was starting a business, you'd all be on my board. Okay, so thank you for that. To Tony, to Deborah, to Rachel, and to Brandwagon for helping us host today. Thank you very much for joining the Malta Business Network webinar. When the session finishes, there'll be a very short survey which we'd love you to fill in, just to give us some feedback that can help us improve our sessions. Good luck to all our entrepreneurs out there, and to those who are thinking of developing their entrepreneurial mindsets, which are applicable to all walks of life, I think. And thank you all, and thank you to the panelists especially for making it such an interesting hour. Thank you very much.